You are in the middle of July and the house is warm. Not dangerous yet, just that heavy, still, late afternoon warm where nothing feels comfortable. So you do what most people do. You walk over to the window unit or the thermostat and you turn it on. And it works. It always works. But here is what it costs. The unit itself ran you $150 to $300. The electricity to run it from June through September adds $40 to $60 a month to a bill that was already tight. By the end of summer, you have spent somewhere between $160 and $240 just to cool 1 or 2 rooms, and next summer you will spend it again, because the machine does not remember last year and neither does the electric company. Now step into my kitchen for a moment. It is the same late afternoon, the same July heat. But I have one cotton sheet, an old one, cost me nothing, hung damp in the window where the shaded breeze comes through. I have another window cracked on the hot side of the house so the warm air has somewhere to leave. And out on the porch, I splashed a little of yesterday's rinse water on the concrete an hour ago, the way the Japanese have done at their entryways for generations. My cost for the evening is 0. Not almost 0, 0. And the room feels cooler than you would believe without trying it yourself. You were not paying for cool air. You were paying because nobody showed you how air and water work together when you give them a path. And there is no money in teaching that. There is a great deal of money in selling you a machine and an electric bill to go with it, year after year. So the old method sits quiet, and the meter keeps turning. By the end of this video, you will know the full setup, the free version and the low-cost version, every material priced, every step in order, the honest limits, and the real math on what it saves. And then you can decide for yourself whether to keep paying. I want to be straight with you before I go further. The modern answer to a hot room is always the same. Close everything up, turn on the machine, and pay whatever the meter says. And if you do not have central air, the answer is supposed to be a window unit or a portable unit, another $100, $200, $300, and then more electricity on top of it. That is the expensive way, and for a lot of folks on a fixed income, it is the only way anybody ever showed them. But it is not the only way there is. Before air conditioning existed, every house that stayed livable in summer did it with 3 things: shade, a true air path, and water. Not a machine, not a monthly bill, a rhythm. And one of the strongest versions of that rhythm came from Japanese homes that were built from the ground up to breathe through summer, using principles that work on your house too, today, for the cost of one old cotton cloth and a bucket of water you were going to throw away. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how to set that up, both the true zero electricity version and a low-cost fan-assisted version for still days. What each one costs down to the dollar, when it works well, when it works only a little, and when you need to set it aside and get to cooled space. I will not oversell this. I will show you the plain reason it works, the exact steps, and the honest limits. Now let me tell you who I am and why I know this. My name is Dot Perkins. I am 72 years old, and I grew up in Kansas watching my mother run a whole household on almost nothing. She never had the luxury of cooling every room by machine, so she learned where air should enter, where heat should leave, and how a damp cloth can do more than most people think if you give it moving air. Now, this Japanese angle is the house design wisdom: wind, shade, water, timing. My mother did not call it Japanese. She called it using sense before spending money. And the reason I am sharing it with you is the same reason I share everything on this channel. I watched my own daughter spend money last month on comfort that a little knowledge would have given her for nearly free, and I cannot stand to watch the know-how go to waste. Before I show you what to do, you need to understand why it works, because the why tells you what to expect and what not to expect. And that is the difference between a real method and a gimmick. The whole engine here is one plain fact. Evaporation steals heat. When water changes from liquid to vapor, that change uses up heat energy from whatever is nearby: the cloth, the air touching the cloth, the surface the water sat on. That is the same reason sweat cools your skin. That is the same reason the Japanese custom called uchimizu, sprinkling water on a hot walkway or entryway, can make the area near it feel noticeably cooler for a stretch. And that is why the Department of Energy says that engineered evaporative coolers, the kind built into desert homes out west, can drop air temperature by 15 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit in properly dry conditions. Now listen, this is important. A damp sheet in your doorway is not the same as a purpose-built desert cooler, and a muggy house in August is not the Arizona desert. I want you to hear me on that because this is where most of the bad advice on the internet falls apart. This method works best when the incoming air is fairly dry, when there is actual airflow through the house, and when you are cooling a zone or an incoming airstream, not pretending you have whole house central air for free. In humid weather, you get less evaporation, which means less cooling. And if you are not careful, you add moisture to air that is already sticky. In dry to moderate air with a real breeze, the relief is genuine and you will feel it. That is the honest picture, and it is plenty good enough to be worth knowing, because most summer days have a window of time when this works. Now, if what I am teaching you sounds like the kind of thing you want more of, the old ways that keep real money in your pocket instead of sending it to the power company, I would be grateful if you would subscribe. I put one of these out regularly, and every one of them is built the same way. The plain reason, the exact steps, and the honest figures. That is all I will say about it. Let me get back to teaching. Here is the system, and I call it a system because the cloth by itself is only one piece. There are 3 parts, and they work together. You stop the heat before it enters. You build a true air path so hot air leaves and cooler air replaces it, and then you cool that moving air with a damp cloth. Skip any one of those 3 and the others do less. Do all 3 in the right conditions, and you have real relief for almost nothing. The materials are simple. If you already own an old cotton sheet, a cotton or linen tablecloth, or a set of flour sack kitchen towels, your cloth cost is $0. If you need to buy, a basic cotton flat sheet runs about $8.50 to $17, depending on size. A 6-pack of flour sack towels, which work well for a smaller opening or a bedside setup, costs about $6.75. You will need a way to hang it, a tension rod, a length of twine, or clothespins on an existing curtain rod, most of which you already have. A bucket or basin for wetting, and if you want to do this right, a small humidity meter, which the EPA says runs $10 to $50, so you know when indoor humidity is creeping too high. If you want the fan-assisted version for still days, a basic 20-inch box fan costs about $35 one time, and an efficient one runs at under 2 cents an hour. That is the full shopping list. What to avoid? Do not use thick synthetic blankets. They hold too much water, dry slowly, and turn musty. Do not let wet cloth sit against wood trim, drywall, or bare flooring for long stretches. Do not seal the room shut and assume the fan makes cold air. It does not. A fan moves air, nothing more. And do not let water drip onto a fan, an outlet, or an extension cord. That is a safety line, and I will come back to it. Now, the first step is not the cloth. The first step is shade. Traditional Japanese summer comfort began with blocking heat before it entered the house. Their deep eaves, their verandas, their exterior screens, all of that existed to keep sun off the walls and out of the openings before the air ever reached the interior. Testing by a Japanese utility found that an exterior shade screen outperformed interior curtains because it stops the heat before it gets through the glass. You can do the same thing. Close your sun-facing blinds or curtains before the room heats up, not after. If the sun is blasting one side of the house, do not hang your damp cloth at that opening first. Put the cloth where air enters from the shaded side. If you have a porch, an awning, a tree, or even a temporary outer cloth screen, use that shade first. The reason is plain. Ventilation works best when you are pulling the coolest available outdoor air, not dragging hot, sun-baked air across wet fabric. The second step is a real cross breeze. The Department of Energy calls ventilation the least expensive and most energy-efficient way to cool a building, and it works best when paired with heat prevention. Here is what to do. Pick one inlet opening on the cooler, shaded side of your home and one outlet opening on the warmer side or higher up. Open the outlet a little more than you think you need, because hot air has to have somewhere to leave before cooler air can replace it. If you have an upstairs window or a higher vent, crack it. Heat rises and wants to escape. If no natural cross breeze exists, this is where the optional fan earns its place. But use it to pull cooler air in or push hot air out, not just blow air around in a closed room. The EPA says plainly that fans in a closed room do not cool the air, they just move it. This is the part most folks get wrong. They set the fan in the middle of the room instead of at the edge of an air path, and then wonder why it does not help. The third step is the damp cloth itself. Use cotton, linen, or flour sack cloth, natural fibers that wet evenly and allow air to pass through. Soak it thoroughly, then wring it out until it is fully damp but not dripping. Hang it taut across part or all of the inlet opening, leaving enough of a gap at the edges that air can still move through and around it. If there is a natural breeze, let the breeze do the work. That is the true zero electricity version. No fan, no power, no cost after the cloth. Re-wet the cloth when it stops feeling cool to the touch or goes room temperature dry. A smaller flour sack towel dries faster than a full sheet, so you will re-wet it more often, but it is easier to handle. On still days, when there is no natural breeze, you move to the fan-assisted version. This is not free. It costs under 2 cents an hour to run that box fan, but it is still very cheap. Place the fan behind or just next to the damp cloth so it pulls air through the cloth path and into the room. Keep the outlet window cracked so the humidified warm air has somewhere to go. Start on low or medium speed. High speed dries the cloth out too fast without giving evaporation enough time to work. Re-wet smaller cloths more often. The Department of Energy notes that evaporative systems need air exchange. The cooled air has to replace hotter air, not just recirculate in a sealed space. Now here is the piece that ties the Japanese wisdom in most honestly. The best documented Japanese water practice for outdoor cooling is called uchimizu, sprinkling reused water on a hot surface near the home. In the evening or early morning, lightly wet a shaded balcony, porch, concrete entry, or the area just outside your intake window. Use reused water where it is safe and clean enough. Japan's Ministry of the Environment specifically recommends secondary use water such as leftover bath water, collected rainwater, or rice rinse water. Testing found that about 1 liter of water on a concrete area produced roughly a 2-degree Fahrenheit drop in the nearby air for about 30 minutes, and smaller repeated amounts worked better than one heavy soak. You are pre-cooling the air and surfaces feeding the room instead of just making the inside wetter. That is the difference between doing this well and doing it wrong. The best timing follows a rhythm. Late evening is your strongest window. The sun is off the house, the outdoor air is cooling, and you can flush the day's heat out and set up for a comfortable night. Morning works if the outside air is cooler than indoors. Midday is usually a shading job first. Only use the damp cloth at midday if the intake side is well shaded and the outdoor air is not too humid. Let me say something plain about the wrong approach, because there is a great deal of bad advice on this. A fan does not make cold air. A wet cloth in still, humid air is just a wet cloth. If you leave everything shut, you are building a steam room, not a cool room. And if you soak your windowsill and your wall every day, you are growing a mold problem, not saving money. This works because of evaporation, and evaporation needs moving, unsaturated air. Take away the airflow, and you have taken away the engine. Now let me tell you where this came from, honestly. The historically strong Japanese practice here is summer-first house design. Traditional Japanese homes were built with fewer fixed walls, sliding partitions that could open wide, deep eaves for shade, verandas that served as breezeways, and water used deliberately to ease heat. The Japanese government itself describes the traditional good house as one built to accommodate summer. The uchimizu custom is documented and still practiced. On our side, old American families used the same plain physics in simpler ways. Cross breezes, shaded porches, damp cloth at windows and doorways before air conditioning was common. Library histories in the Southwest report wet burlap and wet sheets used at openings with early fans. You are not learning a new method. You are recovering an old one that Japanese homes perfected on the building side, and that careful American households practiced on the daily living side, both rooted in the same simple truth about water and moving air. The compounding habit here is not wetting a cloth forever. It is running the house on a rhythm. Shade the room before direct sun arrives. Ventilate when outside air is cooler than inside air, and close up when it is not. Use the damp cloth setup only for the right hours and the right humidity. Do a brief uchimizu outside hot slabs or entries in the evening. And dry every cloth completely after use, every time. The cheapest cooling is the heat that never enters the room in the first place. And once you learn the rhythm, you stop reaching for paid cooling as your first answer. Now be honest about what this does. In dry or moderate air with a real breeze, this gives meaningful relief. Noticeably cooler incoming air, a comfortable zone near the airflow, better sleep on a hot night. That is a strong result. In moderate humidity with a fan assist, you get real but more limited personal cooling near the cloth. A moderate result, good for a bedroom or a chair near a work area. In a closed, humid room in oppressive weather, you get very little. That is a weak result, and I will not pretend otherwise. The phrase in the title, "for free without electricity," is true only for the breeze-driven version using a reused cloth and reused water. The fan-assisted version is very low cost, not free. And the word fast means fast to set up and quick to feel at the airflow path, not instant whole house cold. The 15 to 40 degree drops the Department of Energy cites belong to engineered evaporative coolers in low humidity conditions, not a homemade cloth in a doorway. I want you to know the real picture, because that is what earns the right to teach the next one. Where it fails. During extreme heat warnings, when outdoor air is hotter and wetter than indoor air, in homes that already struggle with condensation or poor ventilation, and in closed rooms. When extreme heat hits, the National Weather Service says to get to air-conditioned space, especially older adults and people with chronic conditions. That is not the day for a damp sheet. That is the day for a cooling shelter. This method is for the many ordinary warm days and warm nights when paid cooling is a habit, not a necessity. Now, the safety, plainly. Keep damp cloth and water away from fans, plugs, outlets, and extension cords. Water and electricity do not mix, and I do not care how careful you think you are. Do not leave water soaking wood trim, drywall, or bare flooring. Dry cloths fully after every use. The EPA recommends indoor humidity stay below 60%, and ideally between 30 and 50% to avoid mold growth. If the house already feels muggy, use a cheap humidity meter before you add moisture. The EPA says not to use electric fans in a closed room and not to rely on them when room temperature is in the mid-90s or higher. At that point, a fan is just blowing hot air at you. And if an extreme heat warning is in effect, this is not the day to experiment. Get to cooled space. I would rather you spend the money than take the risk. Now, I want to take a moment because here is where it all comes together. Look at what we have walked through. Shade first, that is strong, free, and works every climate. Cross ventilation, strong when conditions allow, free or nearly free. The damp cloth in a real breeze, strong in dry to moderate air, the true zero-cost version. The fan-assisted cloth, moderate to strong depending on humidity, costs under 2 cents an hour. Uchimizu outside the intake, a mild to moderate boost, free with reused water. Together, as a system, they give you a real cooling rhythm for a hot room, the way homes stayed livable before compressor cooling existed. The honest math is plain. If you already own an old cotton sheet and a bucket, your startup cost is zero. If you need to buy a 6-pack of flour sack towels, that is $6.75. If you want a new flat sheet, that is $8.50 to $17. If you need a box fan, that is about $35 one time, running under 2 cents an hour. So the real range is $0 to about $52 for the whole setup. And after that, the ongoing cost is a few cents of electricity on fan days and reused water that costs you nothing. Compare that to a window air conditioning unit at $150 to $300, plus $30 to $60 or more a month in electricity, month after month, summer after summer. A portable unit runs even more. The gap is real, and on a fixed income, the gap is grocery money. There is no money in teaching a family to open the right side of the house, wet one old sheet, and use yesterday's bathwater on a hot porch slab. There is a great deal of money in teaching them that every uncomfortable room needs a purchased machine running every hour it is warm. This is not a conspiracy. It is plainer than that. The cheap skills do not produce a receipt, so over time they stop getting taught. The old summer house knew how to breathe. The modern family forgot because forgetting was profitable for everybody except the person paying the electric bill. You can be the one who never forgot. This was never really about one damp cloth. It is about whether a house is managed with rhythm and understanding, or whether every season begins at the thermostat. The Japanese summer house teaches you the building side of that truth. My mother's kitchen teaches you the daily side of it. Both say the same thing. Comfort starts with knowing how heat moves. And a home that depends on you instead of the store is a home that owes nobody. Here is what I want you to do. Tonight, walk through your house and find your coolest intake opening, usually a shaded lower window, and your warmest outlet, usually a sunside or upper window. Open both. Feel where air moves and where it does not. That costs you nothing and takes 5 minutes. This week, test the breeze-driven cloth version one evening. Wet one cotton cloth, hang it at the intake, crack the outlet, and sit near the airflow for 30 minutes. Notice the difference. This month, add an outside shade habit to your worst sun-facing window, and try a light evening uchimizu on the shaded porch or balcony with reused water. This season, use the cloth on days when airflow and humidity make sense. Save the paid cooling for the days when it is genuinely needed, and watch what happens to your electric bill. Even cutting a few hours of air conditioning a week, at the rates most folks are paying, puts real money back in your pocket over a summer. Now I want to hear from you, and I mean it. What room in your house holds heat the worst? And have you ever tried cooling the air path instead of the whole room? And if your mother, your grandmother, or an older neighbor had a summer trick for keeping a house livable before air conditioning, the open windows rhythm, the porch sitting after dark, the wet cloth somebody hung in a doorway. Write it down below. Those little methods disappear when nobody writes them down, and I read every single one. If you found this useful, subscribe. I have another one coming, same principle, different problem. The old outside shade trick that can do more for a hot room than closing every curtain in the house. Same low-cost prevention, same honest figures. Until then, shade the room before the sun arrives, open the cool side and the hot side, wet the cloth and let the breeze work, and save the paid cooling for the days that truly need it. That is how the careful old folks kept a house livable through the worst of summer on almost nothing. That is how it is still done in any home that remembers.